The Walmart supercenter was a vast labyrinth of aisles and soaring shelves that seemed to go on forever on the outskirts of the town. Young employee Sarah frequently worked the night shift, filling shelves and cleaning the shop after business hours. She needed the money from the work, but it had its own peculiar obstacles. Sarah was given the electronics section one moonless night. She kept getting the sense that something wasn't right as she made her way there. The shadows that the above fluorescent lights cast on the racks of technological devices are disturbing. She could hear faint, distorted music coming from the rows of TVs and stereos as she started organizing the shelves. She couldn't place it, but it sounded like an ancient, ominous symphony. Sarah attempted to brush it off as a broken equipment, but her anxiety grew. The weird music got louder, filling the room with a chilling melody that made Sarah feel uneasy. She cast a quick checkabout, hoping to see another employee pulling a practical joke, but the area was empty. To summon help, Sarah reached for her radio, but all it produced was static. She noticed she was alone in the electronics department as the strange music grew louder and louder. Panic started to set in. The TVs suddenly sparked into life, their displays displaying warped, spectral pictures. Indistinguishable figures' faces and soul-piercing eyes gazed out from the displays. She stumbled backward, tipping a console gaming display. The people on the screens started to move, perhaps seeking to escape their virtual chains. The realization that she had to leave the electronics aisle before whatever was happening devoured her caused Sarah's heart to race. The overhead lights suddenly went out as she hurried for the door, leaving the entire area in pitch black. Unseen hands were snatching Sarah and dragging her toward the glowing TVs. She struggled mightily to fight off the phantom entity's persistent hold while attempting to flee. The moment she appeared to be at her breaking point, the emergency lights flared into life and drove the spectral beings back into the screens. Gasping for air and shivering in terror, Sarah staggered out of the electronics section. When Sarah told her management about the terrifying encounter, they assumed she was seeing hallucinations brought on by weariness. She was obliged to continue working the night shift, despite being tormented by the terrifying incident since no one would believe her. After several months, Sarah's anxiety started to lessen. She reasoned that everything might have been a nightmare. However, one night as she was passing by the electronics section, she once more heard the strange music playing gently in the background. She made an effort to tell herself that it was all in her head, but with each step, the music got louder. The screen started to flicker once more, and the spectral forms began to look accusingly at her. For the sake of her own sanity, Sarah realized she had to confront whatever was stalking the electronics aisle. She entered the area armed with resolve, prepared to face the spectral beings and the unfathomable horrors that awaited her inside the Walmart supercenter. The strange music increased in volume as Sarah entered the electronics department and reverberated through the darkly lighted aisles. The figures on the panels appeared to be clawing their way out as the screens flickered more intensely. She inhaled deeply, her heart racing, and pushed on, determined to face whatever was causing this paranormal occurrence. Now that they were more clearly formed, the phantom people on the displays had features twisted in pain and rage. They appeared to be in an unending state of agony as their mouths moved in mute moans. Sarah experienced an intense wave of terror mixed with despair. One of the haunted TVs suddenly extended out with its fingers as she approached nearer, appearing to be reaching out for assistance. Sarah stumbled away in amazement as she retreated instinctively. Something was seriously wrong in this situation, and she was powerless to deny it. Sarah approached the possessed TV once more after gathering her confidence. While the hand was retracted, the figure on the screen appeared to mouth the word, "Help." Sarah touched the screen with shaky fingers, feeling an odd, chilly sensation as her palm made contact. The world around Sarah started to warp and smear as she was abruptly drawn into the TV screen. She arrived in a strange, unearthly place. She was encircled by the spectral forms who had expressions of both desperation and thankfulness. The figures started speaking, an eerie chorus of voices. They described to her their horrible situation and how they had spent decades being cursed and imprisoned in the electronics sector. Finding a living soul who could aid in their departure from their digital prison was their only chance at salvation. With the knowledge that she was their only hope, Sarah vowed to assist them in escaping. Together, they set out on a mission in this peculiar virtual world, making their way across strange landscapes and conquering several obstacles. Sarah started to comprehend the actual nature of the curse that bound these lost souls as they progressed. Back in the digital world, Sarah and the spectral figures identified the cause of the curse as a malicious being that drank from the suffering of the imprisoned souls. They needed to confront this thing and put an end to its horror in order to lift the curse. The conflict with the evil force was fierce and terrible. While the creature released its dark energies, Sarah and the ghostly beings combined their forces to weaken it. As the war continued, the digital world shook. In a last-ditch effort to defeat the monster, Sarah gathered all of her inner might. The entity was slain, and the curse was lifted in a flash of blinding light. The phantom creatures thanked Sarah for helping them become free before Sarah was taken back to the physical world. When Sarah went back to the electronics department, the ominous music had stopped, and the screens were showing regular information. Her co-workers flocked to her side in shock when they saw that she was safe and uninjured. The haunting electronics area had been freed from its enchantment, but she was unable to express the wonderful voyage she had just undergone. I remember it vividly, the night I'll never forget. It was just another shift at Walmart, the graveyard shift to be precise. I needed the money to pay the bills, so I took the job without thinking much about it. Little did I know that this night would turn into a living nightmare. The clock struck midnight as I made my way through the store, pushing a cart filled with boxes of assorted products. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered intermittently, casting eerie shadows that danced on the store's shelves. There was an unsettling quietness to the place, a stark contrast to the bustling activity of daytime shopping. I tried to shake off the unease as I continued my work, stocking shelves with everything from canned goods to cleaning supplies. The sound of my footsteps echoed through the empty aisles, making me acutely aware of how alone I was. I'd been warned about the occasional weird customers and strange occurrences during the night shift, but I figured it was just exaggerated stories to spook the newbies. I couldn't have been more wrong. As I rounded a corner in the hardware section, I saw a figure standing there, completely still. My heart leaped into my throat, and I stumbled back, almost dropping the box I was carrying. The figure turned out to be an elderly man, his hunched back and wrinkled face making him appear frail and feeble. "Can I help you find something, sir?" I asked, trying to sound polite despite my anxiety. The man didn't respond. Instead, he just stared at me with hollow eyes, like he was lost in a different world. I figured he might have dementia or some other condition, so I gently repeated my question. He finally mumbled something unintelligible, and I couldn't make out a word of it. The whole encounter gave me the creeps, but I decided to let it go, thinking he'd eventually wander off or find someone else to bother. But he just stood there, unmoving, like a statue. Shaking my head, I continued my duties, all the while feeling the man's eyes on me. It was unnerving, to say the least, and my nerves were getting the best of me. The flickering lights above weren't helping either, as they cast eerie shadows on the shelves, making everyday objects seem sinister. Hours seemed to pass in slow motion as I tried to focus on my work, but the feeling of being watched never left me. I could hear faint whispers in the distance, as if someone was having a hushed conversation. But when I turned to investigate, there was no one there. The unease grew with each passing minute, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. Around 3 a.m., I decided to take a break in the break room. I desperately needed to clear my head and regain my composure. As I entered the small, dimly lit room, I froze. There, sitting at the table, were the same elderly man and another person, a woman with long, unkempt hair that covered most of her face. My heart raced as I backed away slowly, but they didn't seem to notice me. They were engrossed in their bizarre conversation, speaking in hushed tones that sent chills down my spine. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but their voices were filled with a sense of urgency and despair. I turned to leave the break room, but when I glanced back one last time, they were gone, as if they had vanished into thin air. My pulse quickened, and I couldn't deny that something deeply unsettling was happening in that Walmart. I decided to finish my shift as quickly as possible, rushing through my tasks while trying to ignore the strange occurrences around me. But it only got worse. Items on the shelves seemed to move on their own, and I heard footsteps echoing in empty aisles. My every instinct screamed at me to run, to leave that place, but I needed the job. Finally, As the first rays of dawn began to filter through the store's windows, I clocked out and rushed to the exit. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped something malevolent that night, something beyond my understanding. To this day, I can't explain what happened during my night at Walmart. It was a horror story without ghosts, just a suffocating sense of dread and an inexplicable feeling that I had crossed into a realm where reality itself had unraveled. I never returned to that job, and I'll never forget the night that shattered my belief in the ordinary.